Well, welcome to my podcast. We're sitting here in the smoking room, which has the most beautiful marmalade-y, tangerine-y coloured walls. And today I'm sitting here with Gerald Dickens, the great-great-grandson of Charles Dickens, an author who is one of my favourites, but above all is associated perhaps at Christmas time with the book A Christmas Carol. So welcome, Gerald. Isn't it extraordinary to think that this time last year we were welcoming you, or looking forward to welcoming you for Christmas and the Christmas Carol as a live audience. And I think we had mulled wine, champagne, canapes and everything. And you brought the house down.
It was such an exciting evening, and packing everybody into the hall, and everyone was in great Christmas spirits, and it was a wonderful evening. And the house just embraced it. The idea of celebrating Christmas with a Christmas Carol in here was so perfect. It
was just amazing, and I know, like every other actor, this year must be very, very different for you, and all the interaction with a live audience and the theatres, and you travel to America normally, don't you?
I do.
Back again.
I do a big long tour to America, and of course that went by the wayside very early in the year. It became apparent that things weren't going to work for that this year. So yes, it's been a very different sort of year, certainly.
Very challenging time. So can I ask you, Gerald, how did you first begin to get in to create your performance of A Christmas Carol? Where did that come from?
Well, it wasn't my idea. That's the sad thing. I wish it was. I've been acting since I was 9. I played an oversized cockerel in a school nativity play at primary school, which could take up a podcast on its own, I think, that story. So I'd always loved theatre. But growing up as a teenager, I'd absolutely purposefully distanced myself from having anything to do with Charles Dickens. I didn't want to associate. It didn't mean anything to me. I'd had to study Oliver Twist at O-level and hated it. So Dickens meant nothing, made no connection with me as an author. And then in 1993, which was the 150th anniversary of A Christmas Carol first being published, a lady who was raising funds for a local charity in the town where I lived in Kent came to me and said, what a wonderful idea to recreate one of Charles Dickens's dramatic readings of A Christmas Carol. And it's the 150th anniversary of A Christmas Carol, and he was an actor and you're an actor, and can't we tie all this in together? And I really didn't want to do it, but I grudgingly said, all right, I suppose I will. And I started looking at the book. And as I read it out loud, as an actor might look at a script, I was trying to distance myself from having a family connection. Suddenly these characters just came alive for me. They all had a voice. I mean, the part of that is the brilliant writing. Yes. The description of Scrooge, he's a squeezing, wrenching, grasping, scraping, clutching, covetous old sinner. And by the time you got to the end of the sentence, you're him, you can't help it. And suddenly all these characters started popping up. And I thought, this is fabulous. This is so exciting as an actor to perform this. And that's where it started. The first 2 years it was a reading in the same way Dickens gave it. So with the text in one hand and doing a lot of gestures with my right hand, which was the only one I had available. And then in 1995, 2 years later, I was in America, and I was doing 2 shows in different states, one in Tennessee and one in Alabama. And the Tennessee one was a tea event in the mid-afternoon, and the Alabama was an early evening event, and there were 3 hours between the 2 venues. It was very tight. So I finished the show in Tennessee, and God bless us, everyone. Well, thank you, I've got to go. And I put my book down, and I took the bows and rushed off and got in the car in full costume, and we drove like crazy to the second venue, got a bit lost, were late. The audience were all sat there waiting for me. It was in a little library. Fortunately, I was still in costume, went onto the stage, and suddenly realised that the book was 3 hours up the road back in Tennessee. And I had no time to do anything. And the audience were all there. And I thought, goodness, what am I going to do? I wonder if I can remember it. Yeah. Well, let's try. So I stood on the stage, and Marley was dead to begin with. Nope, that's as much as I can remember. No, I know the next line. There is no doubt. And suddenly I discovered that I knew all the lines. So I started thinking, well, there's no point standing at a lectern as if I were doing a reading when I'm not. So why not start improvising a stage show? So there's a chair there, and there was a stool there, and a table I could use, and a hat rack, and all sorts of things, which I just sort of pulled onto the stage and created what you see now, what the show is now. And it was just so exciting. And after I finished, a little old lady came up to me and said, "Mr. Dickens, that was a wonderful show. We didn't expect you to do a show like that. We thought it was going to be a reading." And I said, "Well, that's a coincidence, because so did I." and then she said, "But to be able to do that with your medical problem was truly inspiring." I said, "What?" No. I understand you might not want to talk about it, but I was a nurse and I could see, and, I respect that. What are you talking about? What had happened when I was pulling chairs in and trying to improvise the whole show? My performance was sort of on automatic pilot. So I was doing lots of big, florid gestures with my right hand, whereas my left hand was doing nothing at all. She was convinced I'd had a stroke and sort of suffered paralysis down this side. And so then I had to rebuild the show and sort of build it up. It was a very exciting time. And I haven't looked back since.
How amazing. Yeah. Absolutely amazing. Well, I so enjoyed it. Actually, this time last year, I had a young intern working with me called Robert Dickens. I don't know whether did you meet Robert at all?
We corresponded. Yeah.
So that was John's always saying, "What the Dickens is coming." But it has been absolutely wonderful. And I had not read Charles Dickens for some time. Like you, I read him at school, and my father loved his books. And then when I came to write my own Christmas Highclere book, I went back to Dickens, to the heart of Christmas, to all he created, and was just amazed how swiftly he wrote A Christmas Carol. Yes. And was then looking back to the Pickwick Papers, which I'd sort of almost forgotten as well, to those extraordinary scenes.
He's got some beautiful Christmas scenes in Pickwick, and sketches by Boswell as well.
Amazing. Yes. So I didn't have enough time to read enough, because he wrote so much. But it gave me heart, because I've never got enough time to write either, and I just have to get on and write. So I thought, and then of course he brought it out on the 19th of December, and then he sold, was it 20,000 copies in two? I mean, extraordinary.
He was into heaven knows how many reprints by the following February. It was extraordinary.
And
it's never been out of print since.
Yes. No, honestly, it's just the most extraordinary man, and I've read some of the biographies around his life, which I've also really enjoyed, to get a sort of bigger view of the man himself.
And he was an extraordinary, complex man. So many different facets to his character. And I think that theatricality in him, he was not a frustrated actor, because he really became an actor, but that love of the stage and love of performing is apparent in his writing. The characters are so theatrical and leap off the page and become real.
They do, which is why I'd mentioned to you before we sat down together that not this year, but a whole year hence, I would love to perhaps do something on Epiphany with you, because that was such an important time to him.
It was.
And he loved the theatricals, and of course it's also rooted in Shakespeare and the different acting and the different traditions, the 12 days after Christmas, which we seem to think is possibly before, mainly because we connect it with, I think, shopping rather than the 12 days of Christmas. But anyway, I thought that would be a lovely way of bringing out some of that.
That was always the big party in the Dickens household. His eldest son, Charles Jr., was born on the 6th of January, and Dickens always took the excuse to throw a huge party.
And in the writing of my little book, that was really what stuck with me, the importance of Epiphany. And I asked the chefs, I thought it was too much for me to make an Epiphany tart. And it was quite a challenge to persuade all the pastry to stand up to get all the different colours of jams and everything else in it. And I think I've given it a couple of years, but then I can ask them to make several Epiphany tarts and see where we go. But I'm not sure. But it's nevertheless the most wonderful celebration, and I like these traditions. And I think with this extraordinary year of the past year of COVID, if you like, I think some of the traditions, the cycles, the seasons are what helps us keep a handle on our own journey through life.
I so agree with that. I mean, for me, as you pointed out, being an actor in 2020 is just a write-off. There's been nothing going on at all. But to be out in the countryside and walking and see the year turn, to see it develop, to see those first green shoots in March and April and May when walking, and then growing and growing, and now sort of coming back again. From that point of view, it's been a really special year, just to see all that and remind yourself that that's there, that's
yes.
happening around all of our mad, crazy lives, dictated by being online and travelling and all the rest of it. Actually, the simplicity of the earth looking after itself has been extraordinary this year.
It has been, and I think the peace and the quietude of it, and I take my dogs out for a late walk around the castle every evening, and the sky and the stars, I mean, I know they've always been there, but I do think I've been more appreciative of it
exactly
recently,
yeah.
and I spend some time, working out where they are, and I've watched them move round, and Mars is still very visible at the moment. It is magical times of year, which I long to describe to other people.
And having so many little positives that have popped out of what has been a terrible year for all of us.
Well, when I'm introducing you this evening, I also wanted to mention, of course, the Theatrical Community Fund, which I think Charles Dickens was the first chairman
he was chairman of. Yes.
And he had a huge charitable spirit within himself for real, as well as writing about it. So I think that emotion and heartbreath comes out for the writing. But it was there, and I thought that was something I would love to mention and then throw the gauntlet to you, because it's so important, and so many young people thinking they were going to start their way up in the acting world, and it's tough enough at the start when you're doing things for almost nothing, whether you're behind or in front of the camera, to be honest, and then to have this going on as well with just a complete lack of being able to take part in a creative process, which perhaps you're yearning to do, has been terrible. And yet the culture, the acting, the musicians have given us such succour, such help during this
online
time.
And the creativity of people, the things they produce from their rooms at home, and amazingly edited Zoom, YouTube pieces. It's been extraordinary.
Yes.
And as you say, that creativity, you can't suppress it. It's always going to come out somehow.
Yes, but I think it's acknowledging and saying, well, how can we help? Because I think you take that bit for granted and then think, but they need it. Although having said that, there are so many elements of the economy which are completely broken. You're never quite sure what's going to come back. But I hope next summer I can have a few concerts or young musicians playing by the temples, or perhaps group some young actors together, if I can persuade some well-known actors to come along and support them, and do a few impromptu theatre evenings where people can watch and perhaps pay the young actors to come along would be particularly exciting.
That's a lovely
really
idea.
good. So Gerald, I know that you've also been incredibly innovative and creative over the last few months, and I'm very excited because you've made a film which people can watch online about A Christmas Carol starring Gerald Dickens. And you've put it together, and I can see the first photograph. You're coming out of a graveyard, so that's optimistic.
It's been an exciting thing. I've been wanting to film the show for a long time, and I've never been quite sure how to do it. And this year has given me the opportunity. As you said, it's something coming out of a difficult situation. So I coordinated with a young videographer, and we went to Kent, and we chose locations in various of Dickens' novels, not necessarily A Christmas Carol. And we filmed my show in some beautiful locations. The churchyard you mentioned at the beginning of the film is the one that opens Great Expectations. That's where Dickens set the opening chapter of Great Expectations, in Cooling in Kent. And I've made a film of my show, which is available to rent this year. You can go online onto my website, geralddickens.com, and just click and you get 7 days rental, and you can share it around and give it to people for Christmas gifts and
what a fun idea.
Do whatever things. So yes, that's been an exciting project this year, very much.
Well, I'm going to look forward to watching that, actually. And funnily enough, even in that first opening scene, which is there, it gives me such a strong sense of place. And I think in all Charles Dickens's novels, you have that sense of place. And I think we're fortunate here at Highclere to, again, have that sense of place, and we're rooted here this year in a very Victorian Christmas, and it's really a homage in some way to your great-great-grandfather, and all that he created, and the sense of helping others, which is at the heart of Christmas. I hope what we were able to do last year, and I hope what we hopefully will be able to do in future years.
In the future.
Thank you, Gerald,
Oh,
so
you're
much.
so welcome. Such
Really
a pleasure to
kind.
be here again.
Thank you. I hope you're enjoying my podcast as much as I'm enjoying making them. Do let your friends and family know about them. Subscribe. And if you're feeling generous, please leave a review. Thank you.